So we are here for the third thematic session entitled Building a More Integrated Euro-Mediterranean Region, Trade, Remittances, and Skills Mobility. Let me begin by saying that I appreciated to be here with colleagues from FEMISE, ERF, and to see many people. I also appreciated to be chair of this interesting thematic session. My role will be quite limited. I will be a kind of watchdog. I will look at the time, and the time dedicated for each paper is 20 minutes. So at the end of the three presentations, we will have a general comment by Raed Safadi. I will come back to the presentation of each author and also a presentation of Raed Safadi. So let me begin with the paper by Karim Chabouni, who has worked on the estimation of the integration of Tunisia and Egypt with the European Union and Eastern and Southern African countries using the gravity model. We will begin by analyzing integrations through trade flows, and then we will move with the other papers with the migration issue, the competition for talents, and we will finish with the analysis of financial development and trade barriers, the barriers against the global value chain participation of countries. So let me just make a short presentation of the author. Karim Chabouni is assistant professor in economics at the Sfax School of Commerce in Tunisia. He is assistant professor in economics, so member of Research Lab International Economic Integration in Tunis at the University of Tunis El Manar, and he got in a PhD in economics in 2000 from the University of Aix-Marseille II in France. So the floor is yours, Karim, for 20 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. So I'm going to make the presentation of this work, which is called Estimation of the Integration of Tunisia and Egypt with the European Union and Eastern and Southern African countries using the gravity equation. Yeah, you hear me well? It's okay?
You can
okay. Sorry. So I will begin by presenting the context of this work. So we have the context of the concomitant free trade involvement of Southern Mediterranean countries in both the Euro-Mediterranean, which is called the Euromed, and the African areas. So two South Mediterranean countries are considered here in this work, which are Tunisia and Egypt, in their trade integration with both the European Union and the COMESA. I will tell after how to justify this choice, why Tunisia and why Egypt. So both countries, they hold open economies. They have various trade agreements with several partners around the world. And also both of them signed association agreements with the European Union in years, for Tunisia it was in year 1995, for the case of Morocco, Egypt, sorry. It was in 2001. And these association agreements, they were followed previous tariff advantages. There were many protocols that were signed with the European Union since the 60s and the 70s. So it's not the beginning of the trade relations with the European Union. Also, in parallel, I mean, alongside this trend, both countries continued their trade integration efforts. They are founding members of the AGA agreement that was signed in 2004 and entered into force in 2007. They are also original signatories of the Pan-Arab Free Trade Area, signed in 1997 and entered into force in 1998. They accessed in year 1998, and for the case of Egypt, and 2018 to the COMESA, which is the Common Market for the Eastern and Southern Africa. This integration was originally created in 1994. And also they are recently signatory states of the African Continental Free Trade Area that was created in 2018. It entered into force in 2019, and it started officially in 2021. As I said, why the justification of these two countries? Because the purpose here is to focus on trade between the South Mediterranean and the European Union, and at the same time to choose countries that are involved with African nations. So I followed the database of the World Trade Organization, and I found that, of course, we have the African Continental Free Trade Area, which involves almost all the African countries, the north and the south of all the regions of Africa. But for this integration, it's too recent, so it was not possible for me to have enough statistics and to create dummies that can estimate the effect of the integration on exports of the countries. So I found that from the 5 North Mediterranean countries that are in trade with the European Union. For the case of Libya, it's not in free trade with the European Union. We can say that from 4. I found that at the same time, if we look for countries that are involved in an integration with Africa, so that was the case for Tunisia and Egypt, and the integration was the COMESA. So this is the justification of the choice of these two countries and of the integration of COMESA. So the methodology here and the purpose is to work through a gravity model estimation. As I said, the European Union and COMESA are target destinations for Tunisian and Egyptian exports, and the purpose is to estimate the effects of the key determinants included in the gravity equation on Tunisian and Egyptian exports, to assess the attractiveness of both destination markets, the European Union and COMESA, as I said, and to compare between these two agreements on the exports, the effects of those two agreements on the exports, and also to think through the roles that both countries could assume in triangular trade relations between all the European Union, the South Mediterranean region, and the COMESA, or the African region. So at the beginning, I will give a brief overview of the Tunisian and the Egyptian contemporary trade. So for the case of Tunisia, we have in Tunisia there is a structural trade deficit estimated at almost 15% of the GDP. So in years 2020 and 2021, there were deficits of almost 4.6 and 5.4 almost billion dollars. And this deficits comes from energy shortage and deficits in raw materials, semi-finished products, capital goods, and foodstuffs. For the key exporting sector in Tunisia, they are constituted of mechanical and electrical industries, phosphates, textile and clothing, energy, agriculture, and agro-food industry. Regarding the imports, they are mainly constituted of energy products, capital equipment for the manufacturing industry, raw materials, semi-finished products, and food products. The main trading partners of Tunisia, we find the European Union, so 70% of the exports, which is a very big concentration as a destination for the Tunisian exports. And even within the European Union, we find that 3 countries hold the major part, which are France, Italy, and Germany, they are the leading trading partners. I mean, we have 70% of export that go to the European Union. I can say that for these three countries, we have almost 60% of the Tunisian exports go to France, Italy, and Germany. A little bit for Spain now and also for Netherlands. But these three countries are the major market destinations of the Tunisian exports. And for the imports, the figures are lower. They have 50% because recently Tunisia diversified a little bit more its imports, and with the emergency especially of China and Turkey as new major suppliers, that hold almost 10% for China and 5% of Tunisian imports in 2021. Regarding the trade of Egypt, we have also structural trade deficits that oscillates between 10 and 15% of the GDP, and figures of about $33.4 billion in trade deficits in year 2020. You have the figures. And yeah, for the case of Egypt, the compressible imports of the country are constituted of especially wheat. Egypt is the world's largest importer of wheat. And also we find some inputs for manufacturing and industrial production. Regarding the exports, Egyptian exports are constituted especially of hydrocarbons, textile goods, household appliances, mineral fertilizers, and phosphates. Egypt commercializes with various partners around the world, so the trade of Egypt is much more diversified than Tunisia in terms of partners. So the European Union is the Egyptian largest trading partner, but the part is almost 30%, which is much lower than Tunisia. Turkey, Spain, and Italy are the main destinations with respective shares of around 8%, 7.5%, and 7%. And for the suppliers of Egypt, the major supplier of Egypt are China, Saudi Arabia, and the United States, with the parts of 14, 9, and 7%. So I'm going to present briefly the gravity equation, otherwise I will not respect the time, because then I will pass I prefer to make more time for interpreting the results. So this is totally theoretical. So we have originally the general multiplicative calculation of Tinbergen, and you have the formula as is it. The exports between both countries are explained by some factors which are independent and they are specific to countries, and also they can be bilateral. Then this general multiplicative calculation was criticized, so we passed to the second equation, which is called the structural gravity equation of Anderson and Van Winkop. Sorry. We have here also the calculation. It will be more explicit than in the empirical approach, where the exports of countries depend on the world GDP. Y is the world GDP, YE and YG are the importer and exporter GDPs. And then you have the second part of the equation, which is constituted of the bilateral trade cost. T is bilateral trade cost. And then we have a new factor which is included. This is the basis of the critics that permits to pass from the general to structural gravity equation, which is the omega, what we call the multilateral resistance terms here, which are resistances that are imposed on the exporter and the importer with the third country. I mean here, the basics that we explain here in the gravity works is that the more the countries, E and G, face trade barriers with the rest of the world, the more they are likely to commercialize with each other, and vice versa. Of course, this work is based on the works of Armington hypothesis, as mentioned here. So there is a log linear transformation of the equation here, and bilateral trade costs here include various geographical, cultural, and economic relations between both partner countries. As follow, if you want, after we can go back to the variables here, because otherwise, as I said, I will not respect the time. And of course, now we have an advanced formula of the log linear gravity model that includes all these variables. It depends on where the exports depend on GDPs, on bilateral variables like the distance, the presence of free trade area, if the countries are landlocked, if they share common languages, if they have common borders. It depends also on the population. So many factors could be included even additionally to the gravity equation. This is the basis. Here, as an important information here, so regarding the gravity works, when we have a panel data, then we introduce the fixed effects in order to control for the multilateral resistance terms, which are very difficult to observe. And generally, if the period of time is not really so long, they don't change so much. So this is why we do the fixed, we introduce the fixed effects. So the equation becomes as follows. It looks more simple, but it is like what it is. And as a specifics of the gravity equation, of the gravity works also, is the likely presence of the heteroscedasticity in trade data, and the existence of zero trade flows. With the zero trade flows, it's really a problem, it's a challenge, because estimating figures with zero trade flows with the log calculation, it will be really impossible. So as a substitute methodology, it was to estimate directly the multiplicative form using the PPML estimator, which is the Poisson pseudo-maximum likelihood estimator, according to the works of Santos Silva and Tenreiro. And we have here the equations become as follows. So we have here we don't have the log of the exports, we have directly the exports, and the formula is as you have it here. So I pass directly to the empirical approach, the methodology and the model here. As I said, okay, we have two exporters, Tunisia and Egypt, and two importer regions, European Union and the COMESA. So the status gravity equation is the structural formula as introduced by Anderson and Van Winkop. It's based off the gravity that was presented just before. We have here the log of exports of Tunisia of Egypt towards destination countries, European Union or the COMESA. Depends on this exogenous variable that I'm going to present them. So we have here the exogenous variables. They are the natural log of the GDP of the origin country in your T, then also the GDP of the natural log of the GDP of the destination country, the natural log of the distance between origin and destination. Here we have a dummy variable for the common language. If both countries they share the common language, even as a second language, not necessarily the same principal language. So colony here we have a dummy variable for colonial links. Also for the case of colonial links, it doesn't mean that a country must be an ex-colony of another. No, for example, if we take the case of two countries, if they have the same colonizer, then here with the dummy we have the value 1. Then we have a dummy variable for the COMESA membership. If both countries belong to the COMESA, then we have a dummy variable. And we have also a dummy variable for the Euromed membership. The natural log of the area of the destination country, natural log of the population of country G in your T. And then we have multilateral resistant terms of country E in your T. Sorry, here it misses the T here, but in the equation it was right. It was not. We had it here in the equation. Yeah, it's multilateral resistant terms of country E or country G in year T. So there's a T that misses here. Then we have a constant and error term. So according to the works of the gravity in gravity models, we have the introduction of fixed fx. So the gravity equation to be estimated separately. I make separate estimation for each exporting country. It becomes as follow. So we have the exporter fixed fx and the importer fixed fx. And the fixed fx here, they incorporate the multilateral resistant terms. That's why they are incorporated here. But at the same time, since they are incorporated, they will encompass all the country unchanged features like distance and area, and lead to the removal of the variable with which the collinearity risk is high, like language and colony dummy.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Oh, I need to, yeah. And I need to show the results. The alternative approach is to use the PPML estimator. So here we have annual data for 21 years and 40 importers, 22 European countries and 18 COMESA countries. Separate estimation, and we have the databases and we have this is a great remark here, is that export values to the European Union are much higher than export values to COMESA countries. These are yeah, I can pass this one. There are summary of variable relating Tunisia to European Union country and everything. I need to show the results. So we have here the panel data estimation using the Stata software. So we have the PPML estimates on equation 10, the fixed FX estimate, and the random effect estimate. We have here the results. So I'm going to just to give an overview of the main results. We find here that regarding the GDPs, the results are really in line with the previous works and in line with what I anticipated. So we have a positive estimates for the case of both. I don't know if you can, if it's clear here, for the case of Egypt and for the case of Tunisia, in all kind of estimates. So for the GDP, it's okay. For the case of the population of the destination countries, the results were really mixed up. It's not, the results were not really as expected. I can pass this one. What interests me here is especially the variables European Union made and the COMESA, the impact, the dummy variables that would assess the impact of each free trade integration, free trade area on the exports of both countries. So for the case of Tunisia, we find that as expected, the values are positive, they are even quite strong, and that reflects that the country has a very strong relations with the European Union. For the case of Egypt, it's almost the same, but we find the result that it's positive only for the PPML results. For fixed effects and random effects, I didn't find the expected signs. The results, they don't show that significance, yeah, for the case of fixed effects and random effects. But the more solid is the PPML estimates, and which is positive. And the figure is lower for the case than the case of Tunisia. But anyway, it's positive, and this is what we need. Regarding the COMESA impact, we find here that for the case of Tunisia, all the results show that they are non-significant. And this is normal because the values of exports from Tunisia to the COMESA are very low. So that's exactly normal that we don't find positive and strong results. For the case of Egypt, we found that for the PPML results, the estimate is not significant, but for the fixed effects and random effects, we find strongly positive estimates, which reflects the case that Egypt exports so much more than Tunisia to the COMESA, although Egypt holds more trade relation with the European Union and with the United States and Turkey, and it's not a very big relation with the COMISA, but anyway, it's not really bad. Finally, to have here the results of the variables distance and language, we find, as expected, we have a negative estimates for both countries, Tunisia and Egypt, for the variable distance. We have a strong negative and significant estimate. And for the common language, it acts positively on export. So just I'm going to conclude. Yeah. So here, yeah, this is as an implication, just and then I have the conclusion. So the findings here confirmed most of anticipations and the level of engagement of both countries in export efforts toward both integrations. So that shows that both countries have strong links with the European Union. Tunisia has a very low implication with the COMISA markets. Egypt has a better commercial presence than Tunisia on the COMISA market. So both countries should work to ensure more widespread commercial presence, especially for the case of Tunisia, in order to avoid the risks associated with the dependence on a small number of target markets. And also both countries could or should, I say should, at the moment it's not really possible for them to assume an effective role as a bridge within the triangular trade link, the European Union, the South Mediterranean, and the COMISA African country. So as recommendations, some recommendations, maybe they are not practical at the moment, but anyway, they are recommendations according to the results found. So both countries need to make the fluidization of the logistic chains between the countries of the three regions, and they need to strengthen also marketing actions within the COMISA countries. They need also to decrease the existing non-tariff barriers in Tunisia, Egypt, and the COMISA country, and also to strengthen the antitrust measures. As a conclusion, this study confirmed that distinct regional agreements do not systematically lead to equivalent growth in mutual trade. To cite the opportunities presented by trade agreements, it's useful to look for explanations such as the several exogenous variables as included in the gravity model. And finally, the recommended actions could be undertaken by various private and public institutions from Tunisia, Egypt, but also with the involvement of the European Union and the COMISA institution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karim. I have two questions that you can keep in mind for the end of the session. First, I think that it's not useful to use fixed effect and random effect due to the number of zero you have in the regression. And it will be easier for you to consider, for example, the Egyptian case in which you have a reverse sign depending on you use the PPML estimator or the fixed effect estimator. The other point is in the theoretical model you propose, which is a classical one, you use population of the destination countries and you don't consider it in the regression results. Why? But
no,
you can answer later on. So now we can move to the second paper, which is presented by Samir Jelti. Samir Jelti is, the title of the paper is Talents Race in the Euro-Mediterranean Region, Policy Recommendation Derived from Panel Data Estimation of the Osmosis Model. And Samir Jelti is Professor of Economics at Mustafa Stambuli University of Algeria and Associate Researcher at the Applied Center of Development in Algiers. He got a PhD in Migration and Development from Algeria. He has also acted as a migration expert for different organizations, including United Nations. So the floor is yours for 20 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank all who have participated in the organization of this scientific event. My contribution is about the talent race in the EU Mediterranean region, policy recommendation derived from panel data estimation of the osmosis model. Our observation is twofold. The first one is that according to the Fragment Report 2022, skills and work shortages have increased from 40% in 2006 to 75% in 2022. On the other hand, skilled out-migration in Africa has increased from 0.7 to 3.6 million between 1919 and 2015. So there is, in general, an unlimited supply of labor in the southern region of the Mediterranean, which coexist with severe shortages of workforce in the north coast of the Mediterranean. This supply and demand has created what we call nowadays in migration studies talent race or talent war. So according to the latest OECD report 2023, countries that do not join global competition for highly skilled migration risk lagging behind. Based on this observation, we have elaborated our principal rationale. What are the drivers of skilled migration? How can it be diagnosed and optimized in the EU Mediterranean region? So the idea is more to explain what is migration before understand what is skilled migration. In economics, what we cannot measure, we cannot manage. But what we cannot understand, we can never measure. So the objective of this study is more to understand the relationship between skilled migration and migration in general, and understand, first of all, migration. Let's start from the beginning. Actually, there are about 20 theories of international migration. These theories explain migration in some cases, in some places, but not in others, during some periods, but not during others. The problem with these theories is that they are not only embedded in their special disciplines, but they are based on a limited observation. They are based on limited observation. They formulate hypotheses that are related to their considered disciplines, analyze limited samples, and try to generalize their findings. We have tried to take the opposite direction and elaborate what we call the global view methodology. Let's imagine we hold the globe in our hand and we can observe all the flaws of human migration from the first human on Earth till nowadays. And then we can focus on the special cases of migration. It's just like a doctor examine a pathology. So to do this, we have elaborated an evolutionary study. It's based on the timeline proposed by Haidt 2012. We have divided the human migration in two major periods. The first one is simple migration. Simple migration from the first human on Earth till the Great Transformation, and the complicated migration comes after the Great Transformation. We have divided simple human migration in three sub-periods. The first one is diffusion. 1 million years ago, the diffusion of humans in the planet has begun. And water availability and adequate climate were the natural determinant of the hunter-gatherers. During the stabilization, 10,000 years ago, tribes learned agriculture and occupied almost the entire planet. Conflicts between tribes have highlighted the role of security as the third natural determinant of human migration. 5,000 years ago, sedentary states with big agglomerations have appeared, and this has made population density to join the three natural determinants. After the great transformation. We can take Industrial Revolution as the date of the great transformation, which doesn't work with what Karl Polanyi wrote about the great transformation, or the date of the beginning of the great transformation. Industrial Revolution, technology, transportation, nationalism, colonialism, managing migration, migration policies, all this effect or these facts has led to accelerated migration and to emerge new types of migration. And nowadays we have talked about brain drain, brain gain, brain waste, burn drain, and nowadays we talk about the talent race. So, in general, the rule is that migration is guided by natural determinant of human migration for more than 99% of the time. And nowadays migration is the exception. Let's talk about how to measure human migration. Nowadays, migration researchers use the gravity model to explain migration, international migration. They have kept the same model and explain that migration is a function of GDP and distance and the other dummy variables, as my colleague have explained now. Gravity model works well with international trade, especially with good flows between countries. But I believe that it is, the gravity model is too hard to be applied on a human phenomenon like migration. So what we have done, we have searched the secret of our movement in our bodies. So osmosis is the spontaneous mobility of water from the less concentrated cells to the more concentrated cells through semi-permeable membrane. So our analogy is very simple. We have considered countries by cells. We have considered borders or replaced borders by membranes and ions of water by humans. In order to measure the osmotic or the osmosis pressure in biophysics, they use the second principle of thermodynamics. OP, nRT on V. Osmotic pressure is a function of number of moles in gas in the cell. R is the gas constant, T is temperature in Kelvin, and V is the volume of the cell. What we have do is replacing the variables of the second principle of thermodynamics by the natural determinant of human migration. You can see that we have replaced number of moles by water availability, gas constant by security, temperature. We have kept temperature because it is a good proxy for climate, and the volume of the cell by the density of population. So when it comes to borders permeability, because in the osmosis logic, we consider that migration pressure is the engine of migration. It pushes people to migrate. And borders permeability is its regulator. Because in reality, borders are not semi-permeable. Permeability can decrease and can increase. So in the osmosis theory, borders permeability is a function of two opposite forces, two inverse forces, networks, migration networks, and control policy. The more we have migration networks, the more borders are permeable. And this may decrease migration pressure in the future. And vice versa, control policies decrease borders permeability and increase migration pressure. Our model is a very simplistic model. We have first calculated migration pressure using the World Bank data, water, life expectancy, which is a proxy of security, temperature, population density. And then we have estimated the three different models. In the first model, migration between the origin and the destination countries is a function of pressure in the destination country and pressure in the origin country. In the second model, we have added distance as a new variable, and we have added also GDP in the third model. The results have shown that the osmosis model is a good approximation of international migration in the EU Mediterranean region. It explains more than 97% of migration, and it is significant. When we have added GDP, the model has not changed, and the results with distance are abnormal. Distance, we have a positive relationship between correlation between distance and migration. This explains that there are geographically far countries that are taking advantage of the reservoir of human migration or the workforce in the Euro-Mediterranean region. When it comes to borders permeability analysis, we are still developing an indicator, but in this case we have used the number of issues with visa as a proxy. The analyses have shown that Spain borders are more open to Morocco and Algeria because of proximity and the colonial ties. France borders are highly permeable to Algerians. Tunisian and Egypt come in the third and the fourth position after Morocco. Germany has the less permeable borders among the four studied European countries. It has issued with only 32,000 visas to Egypt, 16,000 to Tunisia, 15,000 to Morocco, and 6,000 to Algeria. Libyans have received an average of 0,000 issue with visa from the four European countries because of the very low level of security in this country during the study period. And to sum up, France has delivered 994,000 visa for the four neighboring countries, following by Spain, Italy, and Germany comes in the last position. This is the last ranking of talent race published by the OECD 2023.
5 minutes.
We can observe that Germany comes in the first place, France, followed by France, Spain, and Italy. To conclude, the skilled migration is not quite different from the global migration movement. It's still a natural determinant guided by the human natural determinant of human migration, water, climate, security, and population density. It is selective migration policies delete the distance and the GDP effects, then special policies have to target the neighboring countries. As a zoom on the bilateral migration is necessary for the diagnosis and the conclusion of efficient recommendation. And we have to remember that when the selective migration policies can increase migration pressure at the long term. And increasing migration pressure, if there is no legal way to migrate, it will increase automatically irregular migration. This is a work in progress, so your comments are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Samir, for this original paper. Minor comments. First, I think when you define migration pressure, I think you could provide a deeper analysis and justify the variables that you consider. And also, I noticed that in the paper, you consider life expectancy, and when you present the results, you have considered security. I'm not sure that you have defined how you measure security, but this is some question for the end of the session. And now let me move to the third paper by Abdeslam Badre. The title of the paper is Financial Development, Trade Barriers, and GVC Participation.
It's okay.
Abdeslam Badre is an associate professor of migration and policy development at Mohammed V University in Rabat, and founder of Edu Global Solution. His research seeks to analyze current norms that hamper the progress and livelihood of women, youth, and migrants as social groups. Previously, Abdeslam Badre served as a teacher and had a research position in different universities in California, New York, Denmark, and so on and so forth. And he also has had some activities as consultant of international organizations. So, Abdeslam, 20 minutes, no more, the rule, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, President or Chair of the panel. Very delighted to be here among you. I know it's a very difficult task for me now to present and keep you awake as well. You know, I was struggling to stay awake while listening to my colleagues. Very interesting and very triggering presentations. And so in order to keep you awake, I'm going to share with you a short joke about migration, of course. So I come from Morocco, and as you may know, a lot of, unfortunately, Moroccan youth try to cross to Spain using different ways. Some of the ways in the past few years was like some young people would like swim to cross from Tangier to the southern part of Spain. And some of them managed actually to do that. So there were these two guys, young people who really wanted to migrate. So they tried to find a way, and one of them said, okay, I'm just going to train on swimming so that by summer I can cross. The other one is not good at swimming. He said, okay, I'll maybe try to sneak into one of the buses or cars and then get into the ferry and then cross. Anyway, so the first one made it, hiding in underneath one of the buses, and then made it to Algeciras and then eventually to Spain. And then a few weeks later, he called his friend and he told him, I am in Spain. And that really motivated his friend, and then he kept practicing swimming until the beginning of May. He decided to swim towards Spain. And he did, basically. And by the time he reached the shore of some cities in Spain, it was summer, and there was they were celebrating this amateur swimming competition at that beach. So the guy, there were swimmers, Spanish and international swimmers. And the guy, the moment he was approaching the shore, he starts mingling with the swimmers. And because he trained really hard, he swam really hard, and he got firsts. So, and then the organizers thought that he was among the participants. So he won. What he won was a one-week vacation in Marrakesh. So. But then they told him, you can invite someone. So he invited his friend who went before him. So they went back, both of them. So this is about migration, but the topic of my presentation is not migrant per se, but diaspora's remittances. And in this presentation, I'm going to share with you some of the, another dimension of migration, which is remittances, but not only remittances, but the cost of remittances, which is unfortunately not well mediated as the question of remittances are mediated, because most of the time we talk about how much money migrants are sending back home, but we don't talk about how much costs the remittances of these migrants. According to the World Bank Group, this year, 2023, four countries, the four Maghrebi countries, Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria, sent about 65 billion US dollar. And this is what we talk about a lot in the media, but we don't talk about the 10% of that amount that was taken by most of the banks that are actually based within Europe, which means that like over 6.5 billion euros was taken from those people. So the point, or like the main idea of this presentation is, look, sorry, did I turn it off? Yes. To look at the context of this research and then the objective questions, and then talk briefly about the method, finding, and then policy implications. And the context within which this study was evolved is the fact that remittances has been witnessing like a steady growth over the years, and it even proved to be like resilient to mega shocks such as the COVID pandemic or even the war on Ukraine. I think that's the system that did not disrupt or like was shaken when we look at other economic areas. The problem is that like the associated costs of remittances stand as the third highest in the region for the Middle Eastern, for North Africans. We have Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa are the second, the first and second, and the Middle East stand at 6.08%, which is still high. If we look at other corridors, for example, Egyptians, most of the inflows that come to Egypt come from Gulf countries, and Gulf countries, like the average stand at about 5%. And then we have, unfortunately, the pressures, the inflationary pressures resulting from the war on Ukraine that puts so much burden on the Maghrebi diaspora in North Africa, in Europe, and that also affected the amount or the value amount they used to emit to their home countries. And then there is the aspiration of the SDG 10, aspiring for reducing the cost of remittances to 3% by 2023. And then there is also the 5+5 World Bank Group, reducing the remittances to 5%. So within this context, like this idea, the study addresses one central question, and the question is how can or how might neobanks in the era of digitalization reduce the costs of remittances and meet the aspiration of the United Nations and of those migrants to 3%. So the objective is to examine remittances trends and preferences among North African migrants in Europe, and then to analyze the potential of neobanks in promoting financial inclusion. And so the question that I just said, like how can neobanks contribute into the reduction of the remittances costs and thus contribute into the inclusion of migrant community and migrant diaspora within the financial activity. This question was branched out into 4 operationalized questions. The first one is, what factors impact the remittance trends and behaviors of the Moroccan, Algerian, and Tunisian, because these are the 3 focal countries, living in France, Italy, and Spain? And what factors shape these migrant choices of the most convenient financial institution for sending money back home? How do neobanks features such as remittance costs, but other features that were mentioned in the paper, influence the remittance experiences of these migrants? And finally, how could neobanks enhance the financial inclusion and well-being of migrants while contributing to the achievement of the United Nations objective of reducing the costs of remittances to 3%? The method was like a exploratory mixed method. The sampling was based on a purposive sampling for the 3 specific reasons that are listed there, because I was targeting people, migrants, who are over 18 years or old, not targeting young migrants. People who've been in the resident or the focal countries more than 3 months, otherwise they would be still considered as tourists, and then those who are users of neobanks. The sample included people from Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia, who were based either in France, Morocco, and Spain. Data was collected through field work within 15 months, from September 2021 to December 2022. The neobanks that I focused on was Wise, N26, Nickel, and Revolut. The data processing, like the qualitative data, was processed through MaxQDA in order to generate semantic mapping and thematic analysis. And then for the numerical data, I just used descriptives in order to generate estimates and visual representations. So the unit of analysis or the variables were migrant remittances behaviors, perceptions shaping choices of the financial institutions for money transfer, and then perceptions about remittance cost, saving powers, socioeconomic impact of remittances cost, and then the pending challenges to access the neobanks' services. For the population, or like the sample, the final sample, as you can see here, but I have to read just to be quite accurate here. So the study examined 64 participants, 42 were male, and then 22 females originating from Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria, as I just said. The average age was 32 years old. 40% of Moroccans were based in France, 33 in Spain, 26 in Italy. For Tunisians, 72 were in France, 9% in Spain, and 18 in Italy. And then for Algerians, 43 in France, 30 in Spain, and then 26 in Italy. Participants had an average residence duration of 8 years in the host countries, ranging from the newest comer was 2 years, and then the oldest was 15 years resident. All participants identified themselves to be employed, with 13 of them were also university were pursuing university education. Now, with regard to familiarity with neobanks and competitive services, so about 37%, as I hope you can see the figures there, but I'm also like verbalizing that, so 37.5% reported using traditional banking exclusively. But here, I just want to highlight that using them in the host country is not using them for remittances. So they are using them for the daily life. And then we have 34 used both methods, both traditional banking and neobanks. Male leaned more toward traditional banking for remittances, while female were more evenly distributed across the different methods. Moroccan participants favored traditional banking, while Tunisians and Algerians showed more diversity in their preferences. In terms of the remittances frequencies and patterns, Moroccan had the highest monthly remittance frequency at 55%, with 38% sending amount between 100 and 500 euros per month. Tunisians remitted less frequently, just 30%, but sent larger sums exceeding 1,000 euros at least once a year. Algerians fell in between, with 20% engaging in monthly remittances and 45% sending amount between 500 and 1,000 euros at least once a year. In terms of preferences or like ranges of remittances value, here you have like the aggregate data in terms of both sex and countries. So the traditional banking was more pronounced among males, while females were more likely to use neobanks accounts. Moroccan participants largely favored traditional banks, while Tunisians and Algerians have more diverse preferences. Regarding the preferred financial channels of remittances, neobanks typically charge... no, I'm sorry, I have to go here. Yes, here. So now, remittances associated fees. So neobanks typically charge flat fee ranging from 2.5 to 3.5 euros for a fixed amount between 100 and 500 euros, and between 9.3 to 11.3 euros for an amount between 500 and 1,000 euros. In contrast, traditional banks applied a percentage-based fee of 9%, resulting in fee ranging from 5 to 9 euros for an amount of 100 to 500 euros, and 17 to 23 euros for an amount ranging between 500 and 1,000 euros. So neobanks were generally more cost-effective than traditional banks, with potential annual saving ranging from 30 to 134.4 euros for regular remittance, depending on the transaction size for each migrant. Now, the factors shaping choices of channel of remittances, using, as I said, the semantic mapping of MaxQDA, we clustered those factors into 4 categories. For those who are leaning toward traditional banking, trust came to be the first factor, then familiarity with the system or with the financial institution, then adherence to cultural norms, and then accessibility back home for the families. And then for those who are leaning toward using new banks, it was first young age and digital savviness of the population, awareness of the cost-effective of digital remittances services, trust in the security and robust encryption methods of online transaction, and then, of course, the geographic location of both the senders and the receivers, and the familiarity of the family back home with the digitalization and gadgetry tools.
5 minutes.
Okay, already. Wow. All right.
That's the joke.
Here I have mine anyways. So here are some of these testimonies. Familiarity, for example, we have one of the Algerian female participants based in France who said, "It's easier for me to use a bank I'm familiar with than to try something new." Regarding trust, a participant from Algeria employed in Italy said, "People in my community usually rely on trust each other, so it's very normal to send money or anything else with whoever happens to be visiting Algeria." Accessibility, convenience matters to me, so I choose methods that are available everywhere, not here, but there, meaning back home. Challenges using neobanks. So the associated cost, according to the analysis of the data, appear to be not the only factors that would encourage or discourage people using new banks to remit money back home, especially in the region. Other pending challenges range from levels of digital literacy to language barriers, limited outreach and access to internet, and other factors. We have here like a testimony of a female Moroccan migrant in France who said, "I've been using online banking here in France for quite some time now, and I found them very convenient for my daily transactions. However, when it comes to sending money back home to my mother in Morocco, it's a different story. She does not know how to use blah, blah, blah." Now, challenges, there's also the challenge of platforms. Platforms themselves are not all user-friendly, and they don't provide diversity of linguistic possibilities. The identification requirement, a big number of non-formal or non-documented migrants cannot really subscribe to neobanks, because neobanks require identification document before you open a bank account with them. Geography and gender dimension. So migrant familiarity with neobanks and their perception of cost competitiveness vary based on gender and country of origin. The cross-gender variance with the higher percentages of male, 33%, who consider neobanks as somewhat or very cost competitive compared to 13% of female. Tunisians seem to have a more favorable perceptions of neobanks' cost competitiveness compared to Moroccans and Algerians, which could be attributed to the levels and access to different financial services the formers have both in the EU and then in their home countries. Remittances patterns. Moroccans demonstrate a higher frequency of monthly remittances, emphasizing their strong commitment to supporting their families back home. Tunisians, on the other hand, remit less frequently, but often send larger sums, and then Algerians fall in between. These patterns reflect the complexity of North African migrants' financial responsibilities and how they adapt the remittances strategies to meet their families' needs. Trends and pending challenges. Neobank services are widely used for daily spending or like daily life needs within the host countries. However, they are not like exclusively used for remittances. Trust and familiarity happen to be the same motivators for choosing traditional banking system. Accessibility back home. There are a lot of families who live in rural areas where there are no availabilities of traditional banks, leave alone services provided by neobanks. The lack of banking infrastructure in rural areas and the prevalence of traditional banking, and also there is a problem of illiteracy. Fees and power saving. Data show that each migrant monthly remitting regularly an amount of 100 to 500 euros could save between 30 to 42 euros annually. Those sending between 5 to 1,000 could save between 111 to 134 euros. This saving could bring about some changes in both migrant life and also their families back home. The migrant family back home could improve their living condition and standards based on the saved money. And beyond the economic benefits, the emotional well-being of migrants could also be boosted knowing they can provide better support to their families. Now, policy implications. All right. So the question that I raised in this research, which how might neobanks contribute into the inclusion, into the reduction of the remittance costs and inclusion of migrants, there are a lot of promising indicators that by 2030 we have the possibility to reach the rate of 3%. Why? Because we have various financial institutions which are like competing. They know that this is like a very strong sector of making profits. The fintech also market coupled to the growing annual inflows of remittances suggests that the reduction of the remittances to 3% is possible. However, the real question that raised from the results of the present study is whether reducing remittance cost to 3% is enough to enhance non-African migrant financial inclusion, knowing that lack of infrastructure, illiteracy, cultural barriers, and lack of trust still prevail within the new banking system. So now, to answer this question, several other factors need to be taken into consideration. First one, accessibility and partnership.
Be short, please.
Okay, so accessibility and partnership. Infrastructure need to be reconsidered, not within the host countries. I'm talking about the home countries of the diaspora. And then the infrastructure, trust and cultural sensitivity. And here I just want to mention something. Trust has to be communicated and established by neobanks. One example, we have WISE. It's like widely spread neobank now. But one of the things that WISE doesn't tell to its customer is that it does not have any insurance, in the sense that if you put your money there, if you open a bank account there and you put money there, and then one day that bank go bankrupt, it does not have any insurance for you to get back your money, as opposed to N25 or nickel that can compensate you up to 100,000 euros. And then we have offline infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abdeslam. Thank you very much for this very important theme. I remember this morning with the presentation by Simon that migrant remittances represent not less than 10% of the GDP. So this is very important. Of course, I think that you keep in mind that there are some limitations in the analysis which results of an analysis with a small sample, no statistical rejection test, and then you have to be very cautious when you draw some recommendation. But I will stop here.
Thank you.
And I will come to the main commentator, the main discussant of the three papers. I will briefly depict not the career, but what
I'm
Safadi
an old geezer, man.
the problem is that when I present you, I can be long for those who know you and be short for those who doesn't know you. So I am in between, but I will briefly present Raid Safadi, who is currently partner and chief economist at White Shield. Raid is a leading expert on development economics, and he has extensively published papers. He has worked for many international organizations, including the World Bank and the OECD, and he got, some years ago, a PhD from the University of Georgetown. So the floor is yours
Not
for
too
this
many
general
years.
comment.
All right, thank you, Patrick. Thank you for the glorious introduction. I don't know if I deserve it. How much time do I have?
10 minutes.
Well, good. All right. Well, I'm going to try and squeeze as much in those 10 minutes as I can. Most importantly, these are not criticism, but rather my attempt to push you to look into some aspects that I found a bit needing in the papers, so that you can actually move, hopefully, to publish and to first improve and then publish, right? For those of you who were paying attention, we have 3 different papers, but you can knit them together, actually. One talked about exports of goods. The other one talked about exports of people. And then the third one talked about the return of money of those people from the recipient country back home. But that's as much as the comparisons you can get out of these 3 papers. I start with the one on my left, Karim. He's going to bear a bit of my anxiety, not a lot, a little bit. So first, we start with the gravity model. And for those of you who are familiar with the literature, you know that the gravity model, especially in trade, has been tortured to death. And it confessed, I don't know how many times, right? So the first task that you would expect from this paper is to say, what am I reading? What is the objective of this paper? Why am I reading another gravity paper? Then you say, oh, he's focusing on 2 areas at the same time. The euro area, EU, and then COMESA. And then you say, okay, fantastic. Then you go in, and then you discover, first, that your listing of the FTAs that both countries, Egypt and Tunisia, have engaged in, is very selective and only historical. So why do I need to read in your paper that PAFTA was signed in year X, the other agreement, Agadir, in year Y, unless you're going to tell me that PAFTA actually went into goods, it went all the way in tariff preferences, in services it has actually so much to go, and all this. And then you neglect to mention, for example, one of the major FTA that these 2 countries have engaged in, and that has a major impact on your technical specification in terms of the gravity model and the way the paper is written. And that is Egypt, Turkey, Tunisia, Turkey. You talk about, and in your presentation, you explained about the deficits, the trade deficits that both countries have. And then, when I read it in your paper, you got me excited, because I thought, here we go, he's going to go export, he's going to go imports, and he's going to tell me where the source of those trade deficits are coming from within those 2 countries. Then, man, you just, made me fizzle. You just focused on exports. Then I go back and read the title. It said, integration. Integration, Karim, is about both import and exports. So you focus on exports. You focus on two areas, EU and COMESA. and you exclude explicitly a major part and a conduit, of trade, and a major, probably a hub, for both Tunisian and Egyptians, within a value chain perspective, to go through Turkey, because Turkey has a customs union with the EU, right? And you neglect it, including not just in your presentation, in the paper, but also in the estimation that you followed. And therefore, I fault you for that, right? But you're my friend, so, you don't take it personal, right? Since I have 10 minutes, so I'll move on. When you go into the policy recommendations, right? So I go into them, and then the first thing I read, Tunisia and Egypt need to revisit their NTMs. Excuse me, your paper talked about exports. So why am I talking about the import regime of these countries, right? So you parachute some policy recommendations that are not derived either directly or indirectly from the paper, right? So let's see here. Okay. Why am I saying all this? Because one major aspect in this technical specification has to do with the trade diversion. Why am I saying that EU and COMESA, trade increases there or doesn't increase by this much or but not that much? What about if it is increasing at the expense of diverting trade away from third parties, including in this case Turkey, that is not subject to your quantification exercise? You don't seem to be very happy, Karim, right? What does it take? No. All right. So that's one. Now we go to the talent race in the Euromed agreement, Euromed region. Osmosis. You're familiar with the osmosis theory, guys, right? So it's very simple. Take a U-shaped tube, and then you say, all right, put water in here, and then a certain barrier in between, and then you try to balance it. It's very simple. At the end of the day, a skilled surplus region, country, whatever, on one side, and a skilled deficit countries, and then eventually they balance each other, right, on the basis of whatever is that barrier in there and how permeable that thing is. My friend, you were very dismissive of the existing literature, whether in economics, in sociology, in political science, and environmental science. That literature does not operate in silos. They are, in fact, osmosed together, this literature. In one sense, if you take any one of them, the starting point of migration literature is what? What am I going to capture in terms of the pull factors, the push factors on the sending country, and the pull factors on the, right? And then they make their focus on any one aspects to try and push forward a certain theoretical foundation, which, my friend, I had to go to your original paper, right, that you have it, you mentioned, you referenced in this paper, to understand what theoretical foundation you have for, to come up with this osmosis model and apply it in this context. You were so dismissive of this literature, and then you promised me, at least the reader, right? I'm going to offer you a new global theory, new global skills migration theory, right? Got me excited, got a cup of coffee, sat down, put my feet up, and then I see osmosis. I say, wow, all right. I go in. Honestly, it's an approach. I can't fault you for that approach, and it's nice that you have thought about it, right? And thank you for sharing it with us, and of course the effort that you have expanded in here. Now, you start from the premise, you say, and you said it here also, that 75%, that Europe, EU, right, has a 75% gap or deficit in skills. That is not true. It is 75% of surveyed firms within the EU that are saying we are not finding the right people in the right jobs. And that is completely different. And you know why? It's very simple. They are not able to find those people. Those people are there, but maybe working conditions in those companies are not there. Wages that these companies are offering are not there. So I cannot, depend on this to say, well, this is a deficit and this is a surplus, and then I osmosis them together and eventually they'll balance out. Right? 5 minutes. All right. Wow. All right, so now, when I talk about your theories, and in here, I'll send, where is the Passant and Maurice, they've asked me to actually, write those things up, and then you'll get them. So nothing is lost here, right? My friend, if you look at the literature, they've identified and analyzed to death at the micro level all the factors, such as age, gender, income level, all of these that influence migration and the migration decisions at the personal, the household micro level, and also other factors that facilitate or impede. And this is why I summed it up as pull and push factors, right? And they've captured it. You dismiss those. You say, they amount to nothing, these guys. They operate in silos, and he uses those terms, right? That their conclusions are confused. They're confused. Okay? It's your opinion, yeah, but I'm very sincerely disagreeing wholeheartedly. All right? Then let me move to I have still more, but let me move to the last paper, Impacts of Neobanks on North African Migrants. Fantastic work. Fantastic work and fantastic efforts that one individual actually takes it upon himself to do a survey across different countries in Europe, different nationalities, and different modes of remitting those remittances. So the paper actually contains a clear and informative review of the literature. Lovely that the World Bank has done great work in this area, right? Now, whether they're going to achieve the 3%, cost is another matter, but let's see. Now, an important finding is that, first of all, they are pretty damn high, those fees charged by all these institutions. Importantly, my friend, look at their regressive nature. And this is where the problem lies. Because, they could be high because actually the cost of providing the service is high, which I don't believe. I mean, they're extracting monopoly rents there, those intermediary banks or service providers, right? And therefore, to add more support, more evidence to say, well, look at the fees, look at the costs, right? And there's a huge gap between the both of them. And therefore, I'm going to go and work on a policy perspective, some policy initiatives to actually reduce that gap. And then it starts, and this is where I want to be as helpful as I can in terms of the policy interventions. Please consider the following. So first, start from the premise that, how you reduce remittance cost from two dimensions. On the one hand, consider the factors that have hit here to kept fees high. And these include weak competitive environment in the remittance country, lack of access to technology. This is literature, not your survey, by the way, right? Lack of access to technology supporting payments and settlement systems, and burdensome regulatory and compliance requirements, on behalf of those institutions, all tend to, keep those high. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, you want to consider those factors that have kept the adoption of neobanking services low, including, which was surprising, right? I mean, look at the age group that you have captured, right? They're young, and and within their own communities, right? In the host countries, they're using those digital services for their daily payments, right? So yeah, I'll get to the then policy conclusions, right? So the efforts to, consider efforts to reduce remittance costs that would improve the efficiency of remittance transactions, for example, by enhancing market competition and reducing the high profit margins. I am suspecting, I did not do the investigation, but I suspect that there are monopoly rents that are there, facilitating remittance services providers access to new payments technologies. So this is the recipient country's payment technologies and what regulates them and how you actually can reduce the regulatory burden and then have them disseminated across the territory within the recipient countries. The second most important one is how to avoid over-regulation, excessive monitoring, excessive reporting requirement that would stand in the way of small competitors. This is the problem, right? Why we start from the premise, and I couldn't prove it, and it's for you to prove, is that I said there are monopoly rents. Those monopoly rents automatically are preventing new small, medium enterprises to coming into those markets. And then for them to come into those markets, you need to reduce all the reporting requirements. And for that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and sorry, gentlemen, for if I exceeded my time, and best of luck. Cheers.
Thank you, Raid, for these vigorous comments. So now I move to the answers, and I will begin with the first presentation. So, Karim, if you can bring some elements of comments.
Yeah, just to, I don't know, you gave me some questions at the beginning about the population of the destination country.
Yeah.
You just wanted to know.
No, you consider the population of the destination country in your theoretical model, while you don't consider it when you test.
No, I consider it in the
But
test.
I can see it.
It was included.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, but
That's
the
fine.
results. Yeah,
That's
but
fine.
no, I just said that the results they are not as expected. But anyway. Okay.
This is something
Yeah,
else. You have a
also-
theoretical model, and then you forget it.
You drop it.
Yeah, you also gave me a question about the PPML method, fixed effects and random effects.
Yeah.
Could you please?
When you have a fixed effect, the advantage of PPML is to consider the number of zeros that you have in bilateral trade.
And to avoid the likely heteroscedasticity.
But there is nothing to do. This is a bias that you have when you consider an estimator which doesn't account for the number of zeros you have in the bilateral trade.
But anyway,
we can discuss
but
later on.
Anyway, in the data we have, especially for the case of Tunisia, there are many zeros,
Yeah,
because
so
the exports
the
are
fixed
really low.
effect is not correct.
Anyway,
and the random
I said,
effect is not correct.
But anyway, I consider that since the beginning that the PPML estimates are the more reliable. For the two others, I said, okay, I can maybe have more information, and if it would be possible to consolidate that or not. But generally, for example, I relied in this, generally in the gravity works, I relied on works of Nisita and the works of, especially of Yotov. And then on the works of Yotov, directly he goes to the PPML estimates. That's what he do.
But
he
in your case, please, you have a reverse sign depending on the estimator you consider. So you have to justify why you have reverse sign for COMESA and the European countries. So it's just an advice for a publication. If you go to the publication with a reverse sign, depending on the estimator you consider, it will be a source of problem for you. Take it as an advice, and do as you want.
Yeah, okay. Regarding the remarks of Mr. Safadi, you told me about Turkey. Yeah, I agree with you that Turkey has a big influence on on trade of Tunisia and Egypt, but it's not in the topic in the chosen topic. Anyway, the chosen topic since the beginning. I know that trade with Africa is exactly low, but I wanted to test it to show how in the gravity model the exports to the European Union will lead to positive and strong estimators, while the exports to Africa and they would lead to not to negative signs, but non-significant estimates. So this case, since the beginning, it was to test at the same time exports to European Union and to the COMESA country or to African countries, and Turkey was not in the subject since the beginning. But I agree with you that Turkey is very important, and the trade with Turkey now is emerging and is developing for both countries. You also told me why did I don't know, mention the integrations like Agadir, the pan-Arab country, the pan-Arab integration, etc. It was just a brief overview to show an idea how open economies are both countries. That's all. It's not. I didn't even in the paper. It was only few lines to show that both countries, they are not involved only with not only with the European Union, they also integrated other integrations, among which there are Agadir Agreement, there are Pan-Arabs, and etc. Okay? I don't know if, yeah, I think it's okay?
Yeah, I think we can extend the discussion after the session. It could be better. And then let me move now to Samir.
Thank you. Thank you. The first question is from Patrick. So you have asked me how to move from security to life expectancy. In our first article, 2007, we have worked on, we have used the number of armed conflicts to measure security. It works. And then after, in 2018, we have worked on the Syrian migration crisis in 2015, and we have discovered that migration is it's a theorem of osmosis which explains forced migration, and we have discovered that migration is related to the number of genocides in Syria. There is a great correlation between them, and then in this paper we have tried a new variable as a proxy, and life expectancy. When the more we have life expectancy, the more we have it's correlated to security, and it works for the model. So I would like also thank Mr. Safadi for his encouragement. I have requested comments and tips and advice to perform the work. It's a work in progress, and you know that the osmosis theory it's a unifying theory of human migration. It explains migration from the first human on Earth till nowadays. It explains why do people migrate and how they flee wars. It's the theorem of forced migration. I can send you the article also. It explains also colonial migration. It doesn't consider colonialism as an act of from the countries with power, but as a movement of population. And there is two theorems. I can send you the other articles about migration, the osmosis, the unifying theory of human migration. And one I explain in my first article that I don't criticize all the existing literature. The existing literature, it's work, and they have worked, but their work was not very organized because I I told at the beginning that the problem with the existing theories is that they are embedded in their special disciplines. And migration now, we cannot dissociate the economic factors of migration from the sociological, from the geographical. That's why the osmosis model, the natural determinant of human migration, are collecting all these factors, the sociological, the geographical, and the economic factors. So, based on the osmosis model, we can forecast the future migration, and I can send you the article. We can forecast the future of human migration, the trajectories of human migration, and of forced migration, and then we can make plans to save people, to prevent new migration crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Abdeslam?
Yeah, very briefly, thank you very much for the reader and for discussants as well. Regarding the small scale, yes, I know, Patrick, maybe you didn't read the paper. It's already mentioned in the limitation that the paper does not claim any generalizability because it's not based on numerical data, but on interviews. We have more than 1,350 pages of the transcription of the interviews. It's 1,350 pages from 64 interviews, each interview more than 20 pages. It lasted between 20 to 45 minutes. It's a lot of data, and initially this paper was supposed to include also the interviews I carried out with the managers of the new banks. But I find out that I would do so much injustice to my data, so I decided to write another paper shedding light on the other perspective, or like the banking perspective. Raid, thank you very much for the comment and for the flattery. I take into consideration the point that you mentioned that, yes, we need to investigate why, although we have this high competition of new banks, they are still keeping the rate as it is. There must be something. Is it a monopoly? Is it what? I don't know. It's something that needs to be investigated. And then within the Southern Shore, yeah, we need to break down the regulatory framework. It's very rigid, it's non-flexible, and that makes it very difficult, if not impossible, for new banks to establish satellites in those countries. But I took note for all the other notes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Abdeslam. So let me move now to the audience. We have time for 3 questions. So I see 3 hands. Please.
Yeah, I have a short question for you.
Yes.
And excuse my ignorance on the subject. What about Western Union transfers? Where do you include them? In traditional banks, or this is not in Europe? Because what I see from migrants is that they use a lot, or they used to use a lot Western Union, which I don't know where it goes in your study. The other question is a comment to Karim. I am not astonished that you find out that the free trade area of Egypt with the EU did not have much effect on Egyptian exports, because you said yourself that Egypt, in the case of the European Union, exports a lot of oil and gas to the European Union, which is not affected by trade restrictions as tariffs. So there are no tariffs on oil or on gas, and therefore the agreement with the EU could not have much of an effect, because this is irrelevant for oil and gas. That's my comment.
There is a question in the back. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you very much for all the presentations. My question goes to Shamir, because I don't really understand what is our interest in investigating whether the data match a specific law which has been imported from a completely different field of science. be it gravity, be it osmosis, be it 12-tone music, I mean, who cares? We can run regressions basically without pre-specifying any kind of functional form. We can test for nonlinearities, we can test for omitted regressors, everything. We can basically find the correct functional form while we work. Is really this gravity or osmosis thing of any kind of practical relevance? Or is not rather of practical relevance the question which I think you have basically omitted, namely causality? I mean, you can always run regressions, but we know it's just a correlation which we find unless we have a specific model which tells us that here a causal effect is at the heart of migration. When I look at your, when I look at your regression, I could argue for some of the regressors that they are perhaps endogenous. So what I would like to be convinced of is that there is truly causality at the heart of your analysis. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have time for the last question. Please, as short as possible. Precise, but short.
Yeah, just three comments quickly. So first one is for Karim. Is I think when you see the typology of companies, they are export to Europe and the other export to COMESA is not the same. And the majority of the of the export of Tunisian to Tunisia and also Egypt to Europe, they are done by offshore companies. And you have just to take in account that will be not the same company that will be that will be export to these companies. I totally agree that we also another point very important because we have studies about that is for the talent when they immigrate they have worse work conditions, and even in terms of salaries they are about 20 to 30% less. My last one is about for the remittance, and now we discuss about we can have more revenue from remittance, but that will be more from informal immigrant. And for the season, they don't use, for example, digital tools, because many of these remittance they come from the informal immigrant, and when they say we have to improve that, the correlations is with informal immigrant, is not with the way, is not the other the kind of immigrant that they send remittance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I turn to Karim, and I has to be very brief for a reason which is the punishment would be no coffee break. So please be as brief as possible.
Yeah, I will have just three remarks. Yeah, regarding the relation between Egypt and the European Union, you know, the result they showed for the PPML result, you don't hear me? Regarding the results of the Egyptian exports to the European Union, the estimator is positive for the PPML estimation. It's not as strong as the Tunisian estimation, the estimator, but anyway, it's positive. So we know for the case of Egypt, it's more diversified as in terms of export destinations. So that's normal that the estimator is not so strong. But anyway, it's positive. We don't have the same results in the fixed effects and random effects. But for me, the more reliable for this work, and even in many gravity works, is the PPML results. I have also here regarding the exports of Tunisia to the COMESA countries. You told me that they have the offshore companies that make the exports. But anyway, I rely to statistics here. I take the statistics. Whatever are the origin of the companies that they are exporting. For me, I don't see who is exporting. I see only the statistics and the quantity of exports. Just I want to close with a remark about the gravity models, as Raed told me. Yeah, about the critics to the gravity models. Most of the critics they were since the beginning, and they justified the transition from the general equation to the structural equation, because the basics of the critics to the gravity models is the lack of the theoretical foundations. I said I tried to mention it at the beginning when I presented the gravity model, but I didn't have time to make that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Samir?
I have, at the beginning of my presentation, I have demonstrated through an evolutionary study that during 99% of the lifetime, human migration was guided by the natural determinant of human migration. So water, security, population density, and climate. And during this period, I have demonstrated that through this econometric model, that it still explains migration, is the root drivers of migration, this natural determinant of human migration. If nowadays migration is from the majority of migration are from the south to the north, it's because in the north we find more water, more climate, which is more adequate, security, and population density, which continue to play the role of the magnet of attracting more and more population, and it will continue. It's a general dynamics. So what you need more, I don't understand. I have explained anthropologically for 99% of the time, and econometry. Okay.
I think that you can extend the discussion during the coffee break. So please, at the
Yeah,
slide.
just the question to your, the answer to your question. I mean, in the paper, there is a section where I do benchmarking of the different new banks and also traditional banks. And in between, there are traditional banks that not converted, but also incorporated new bank services. For example, Western Union, you can go right now to their website and then pretend that you're going to send money from Italy to France, from Italy to Tunisia. And it's going to tell you how much you want to send. Up to 500 euros is zero fees. You are not going to pay anything except the currency exchange. That's another way that how they make money. But the thing, once you say, okay, I want to send 500 euros, but the receiver is going to come to an office union, to a Western Union office and pick up the money, then the fees is going to turn into 9 euros. So if you're sending money from Western Union to someone who is using digital banking like Apple Pay or whatever, the fees is going to be free. But if I'm sending it to my grandmother who doesn't know how to use digitalization and she has to go to post office and withdraw money, then she will have to pay 9 euros. But
No, please. No.
Yeah.
We don't have time now.
Okay.
So let me thank the speakers and, of course, the comments provided by Raed. And thank you all. I'm sure that there are other questions, but unfortunately the papers was interesting, and this is probably the reasons why there are potentially many questions that remain, and with some frustration for some of you. So thank you very much for this session, and now it's a coffee break for maybe at least 5 minutes.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Well, thank you very much for your sharing.
this delay of 30 minutes. We are going to have 3 speakers in the table at the end, so I think we can gain a little bit of the time that we have spent in the previous session. You know that this session is devoted to the green transition of the Euro-Mediterranean region, challenges and opportunities on the way to resilient net zero economies. In my opinion, it is maybe one of the most important issues that is inside the Mediterranean area and also in all the world. Maybe, as you have listened last week to the Secretary General of the United Nations, there's no future without green transition. He has said that we are decades behind the transition to clean energy. And he said that we have opened the gates of hell. It's a very, very important problem, and it is a condition sine qua non to have future without reducing the effects of warming, reducing the effects of climate change. We won't have any future in any area around the world. And in the case of the Mediterranean area, it is even more urgent to take measures. As you know, and you have read in the concept note of the conference, the Mediterranean area has a faster declining in the atmospherical conditions compared with the rest of the world. It goes 20% faster than the rest of the world. It is a problem that we must assume. It is a problem that we must attack, but it is also an opportunity to look at the Mediterranean like an area that can be a net winner in terms of economics, in terms of exporters of clean energy in the future. But it is just possible if they change as it is expected. And what we have seen in last years, it is not the real path now. So today, in this afternoon, we are going to consider with our speakers 2 different issues. The first one is which are the challenges that we can observe in terms of green transition in the Mediterranean area, and specifically in the southern Mediterranean countries. And the other one is how we can boost this transition, this green transition, through different policies. The person who is going to speak in the first place is Professor Adel Ben Youssef, Professor of Economics at the University of Nisa, Sofia Antiopolis. And please, directly, if you can answer the first question that you have received, that maybe it's, as you are the beginner, can you give us an appraisal of the different challenges, the different possibilities that we have in the southern Mediterranean countries in this subject, in this topic? Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your welcoming speech and for the opportunity. I would like to welcome also the organizer of FEMISE. I am going to answer the question, but from different angle. I'm observing 2 transitions since 25 years, more or less. And at least 20 years before, we raised these questions within the FEMISE. And I have some reserves with FEMISE. And what we are seeing nowadays is that the MENA countries are facing 2 transitions. The first one is, of course, this ecological transition, and the other one is the digital transition. And in somehow we need to link them, because one can serve the second. Let me just, I was not very good student, but when I have some conference, I would like to stick to the main topic of the conference. So it's about shifting paradigms, opportunity for a deeper EU-Mediterranean integration in a changing world. We need to say what are the new paradigms. At least I'm going to highlight two paradigms. What kind of shift, and the problem is with the shift nowadays, and we need all to be shifters. And what is this changing world, and how to deepen the EU-Mediterranean integration? Let me start by digitalization, because it's key for me, because this is the big shift. The big shift is that we have an ecosystem of humanity which is changing. Nowadays, we have around 30 billion devices connected through Internet of Things. We are going to a world where it will be around 300 billion devices connected. So humanity is changing. We are in the center of an ecosystem, a new ecosystem. And this ecosystem is making the transformation in all the institutions. One of the big change is the shift for the economic institution. The institution of capitalism are shifting. And for example, the institution for trust, we are shifting from central banks to Bitcoin and the electronic monies. And this is, behind this is just the blockchains. And blockchains are institutions of trust. So we are building institutions of trust differently, but with these technologies. We are transforming the education experience. And you have seen all the debate after just one technology is, okay, this is a generative, we put ChatGPT, and then we need to transform all the things and to think about education experience, etc. So we have a deep transformation also in the labor market with these robots but we have some constraints, and these constraints are uncontrolled speed of the change. We are not controlling the speed of the change. That's why 1,000 scientists have asked to stop any development of EA in order to control this. We are not controlling this. We have an ecosystem pushed by technologists, but as policymakers, even as scholars and researchers, we have not the time for analyzing this. And the things are changing very fastly. The direction of the change is not well defined. Who are benefiting from these technologies? Where to go with this technology? So Professor Antonelli, Cristiano Antonelli, said that within technological change, you need to make the difference between two things, is the speed of the technology and the direction of the technology. And you need to master both the two. If you don't master the speed and the direction, you are not under. And in our region, we need to master both the two. And we are not mastering this. And the question of the skills. These technologies are not neutral. These technologies are skill-based. They are profiting more for the skilled. And we have a war of talent nowadays for these technologies. Let me say that within this change of the paradigm, within these 10 technology combining with themselves, they are creating a new revolution, industrial revolution, and we are speaking about Industry 4.0. Most of the people are making confusion between Industry 4.0 and Industry 3.0. When we speak about automation or automization, it's the 3.0, not the 4.0. 4.0 is the convergence between the cyber-physical system. That means that this is a new paradigm. And within this, Internet of Things is the main technology. And we are already, but no one is mastering this, but we are already in a system where Internet of Things is everywhere. So, at the same time, we have this ecological transition. And if you want to see, is it a transition? No, it's a huge transition and very rapid and sharp transition. See the curve in order to be, how to do in order to be aligned with the Paris Agreement. We need to move from the first trend to this second trend. And this drop, you need to make the change for all your the economic system to be compatible of this. Most of our country in the south area of the Mediterranean has signed the Paris Agreement. That's what does it mean for Morocco, Tunisia, Jordan? Less 45% of CO2 emission by 2030. How to do? They don't know. When is it 2030? It's just in 7 years. We need a big shift. We need a transition, but in a very short time. This is the change. The problem is the time. We have not time in order to change. So we have limited time to make this transition. And at the same time, we need to put in place these mitigation policies, and we are seeing the risks and the problems coming. And نترحم على شهداء Libya, sorry to say it in Arabic, but you have seen one disaster in Libya. What caused one disaster? And this is just the beginning, as Professor Raphael said. This is the first signs of this change, the big change. So we need to adapt our economies. We need to change our agriculture. We need to change a lot of things at the same time. And we have not agreement. The agreement that we have is just we have signed papers. In theory, we have signed papers. In practice, we have not the money in order to adapt ourselves. We have not caused this problem of the climate change. But the consequence, we are seeing them. And we are paying them already. And how to make this costly shift in a limited time, this is the new paradigm. So I don't know how to do, but perhaps the technology that I have spoken about can do this. If we do this in the right way. Let me give some idea about this climate change. 700 million people will be at the risk of being displaced by drought only. When you say about Mediterranean cooperation, etc., expect that there will be a huge migration in the future caused by climate change. It's 1 billion children at risk. This is climate change. In Tunisia, small country, we have 1 billion children under the threshold of poverty. And we will have more by climate change. Are you expecting for them that they will stay there if there is no future? So I think that we can make the digital transition work for the ecological transition. This is the way to link both the two. How? Because these technologies are really giving opportunities for our industries to adapt and to be more efficient, to use less resources, raw materials, saving in materials, saving in water, saving in energies. This is not theoretical. In Tunisia, we have about 200 firms already started these types of program under Industry 4.0, and they are showing a cut in the water using about 25%. In raw materials, they are already experiencing the change. But these technologies are costly. One of our problems in the southern Mediterranean countries is we are making decisions not based on data. But when we put the data in the center, we can control the phenomenon. We can control the production chain. We can control what we are doing. Other thing is raising the awareness. If you want to act on people, you need to raise the awareness. And these devices are powerful for the awareness. For example, yesterday, when I arrived at the hotel, it said that Catalonia has a big problem with water. Please save water. But we need this in our, with the program of the conference. We can send it with the program, and we will be aware of this when we come. It's very easy. But not only awareness. We can also more than this. We need, and sorry to do this, to say this, we need to manipulate people if we want to be compatible with this big transition. And this is what we call nudges. And this is what we are already doing. People needs to be le coup de pouce, the nudge, in order to shift. And we need them to shift very rapidly. And these technologies are very powerful. Now I would like, if you want the entire paper, it was published today in the EU Med yearbook. My paper, it was really a coincidence, but I would like to highlight two main things. The first is we need not Industry 4.0 in our region. We need Industry 5.0. And what is the difference between the two? The 4.0 is centered on products. It's centered on technology. It's centered on productivity. We put robots, we put this technology in order to be more efficient, in order to produce more, in order to less. But where is the people in this? The difference between 4.0 and 5.0, that we need the control, and the control needs to be with the humans. From time to time, we are losing the sense of what we are doing. You go with your car, and the car, if you don't attach your belt, the car don't move. What is this? I need to control the car. It's not the control to say to me to move or not to move. And we need, if you look at the Japanese, they don't accept the Industry 4.0. They are in the 5.0 and 6.0. That means that in every process, we need to put a woman. And the woman who take the decision at the end. We need not to be pushed in order to put the robots everywhere. We need cobots, not robots. We need the robots that work with humans. And this is in order to keep the labor market efficient in our countries. So we need really to center on human. We need to center on sustainability, not on profit. Because if you use this technology, all this technology, you can increase your profitability, but with destruction of the nature. And here, the 5.0 puts the accent on sustainability. It's more, it's better, not more. And finally, we need to focus on resilience, not efficiency. And this is really a big challenge for our country nowadays. Because all our countries in the South are implementing now programs for Industry 4.0. In all our country, they are replacing the upgrading policies in the industry by this new paradigm. But if we shift, and if you have not the right people, they are going to shift in 4.0, which is counterproductive for our countries. My last comment is about the artificial intelligence. We can be in the South, we can host a lot of hubs of artificial intelligence. We are already hosting, because artificial intelligence needs just brains and laptop. And this is, it's not like the other industry. It's, and we have already the localization of center of artificial intelligence in Morocco, in Tunisia, in other countries. And artificial intelligence is fundamental for this energy transition. It can help our countries for our artificial, in the energy transition. This is the impact of artificial intelligence. I have shown, this is an estimation by Boston Consulting Group. Up to 5 to 10% of the total GHG emission can be cut by use of artificial intelligence. This is a big change, and this is fundamental technology for the mitigation side. We can also make prediction for our agriculture. Morocco already used artificial intelligence in order to predict the drought in order to have the better way of using agriculture. You cannot do agriculture if you have not this prediction nowadays, because the world is changing and you need to use this kind of. My concluding remarks, and I stop here. We need in our country to make industry for 5.0 or 6.0 and not 4.0. This is fundamental. And as FEMISE, as ERF, we need to be very careful to not be pushed to adopt this technology and losing our people in the center of the process of and this technology. We need to be really very careful here, not to be pushed to adopt the technology without having the reflection about it. Second, we need to manage this rapid shift and brutal shift. And this needs education and nudges. And we are lacking a lot of works in our country about experimental economics, about experiment and how to put the experiment, how to make the nudges, how to make people change their habits. We need to deepen the EU-Mediterranean integration by complementary regulation in matter of digitalization and values also. And in the production system, I think that Southern countries are countries that can host R&D centers. This is shown, for example, Airbus R&D center, one of its centers is in Morocco. Boeing, one of its centers is about putting 4,000 engineers in Morocco. So we can host this. We need a circulation, brain circulation. And there is no problem. There is ways of making brain circulation nowadays. So no, we need not to have this fear of that some of the brains are going in the other thing, but we can host also. I think that I am observing this. The crisis of purchasing power in Europe are pushing a lot of people in the other country of the South because they have a better living condition and they can work from abroad. And this is a change. But how to make that our hubs can host these people. Lastly, I would like to make my last comments are, I was younger, it was about, it's my beginning of the career, and Jean-Louis Refers, president of the FEMISE at that time, he said in 2004, there is rationality that the southern countries don't adopt ICT. I was shocked when he said this. And but there is a rationality to not adopt any solution coming from abroad. There is a rationality in order to contextualize. There is a rationality to make choice. There is a lot of technology nowadays, and technology for sustainabilities are available. But we need to know where to go, and this is fundamental. The other thing that I would, and I'll conclude with this, in 2004 we have made the first study with the FEMISE for digitalization of the EURMED at that time. Unfortunately, 20 years after, there is no systematic survey in all our southern countries about digitalization. If you look at the data, they are very poor. You cannot do anything with this. We need to push as FEMISE, as ERF, in order to implement the same survey that the European survey. All the Western countries, nowadays, Kosovo, Macedonia, North Macedonia, whatever, they are implementing the same survey for digitalization. And we are working in order to highlight what are these countries doing. And for our country, we have no data. We have just, the firm has internet, has not internet, has a website, has not a website. Oh, 20 years after. We are speaking about IoT, CSP, whatever, how to do in order to deal with all these problems. So thank you very much, and stop here.
So let's go to follow with Dr. Mahat Al-Naber, Director of Science for Society Center and the Royal Scientific Society in Jordan. And she's going to focus the speech around one of the most important issues related with green transition, and in her case, she's going to focus the presentation in agro-food involved issues. Okay, so no, it is open.
It's working?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Professor Rafael, for the introduction. And actually, thank you, Dr. Ader, for this insightful information. To be honest, you made me shift at the starting of my introduction, because hearing the impressive policy recommendation that you introduced, I noticed that there is a lot of interlinkages between the policy recommendation that you put for the industrial and technological sector and the one that I have for food security, for water system, for energy system, and also for the environmental and biodiversity. Actually, we know what is needed to be done, but the issue is how to implement that and how to advocate for all of these policy recommendations that we all have in mind and that we all think that is going to be useful if we implement that in order to have more sustainable life. And I believe we're going to use this platform that FEMISE has provided us in order to advocate for this policy recommendation, for technical recommendation, for social recommendation, in order to achieve our needed objective, which is sustainability. Talking about this, to be honest, I'm not from a background of economist. I'm agronomist working in water resources management. So I'm glad that FEMISE is shedding the light of such a challengeable aspect that drains the region. When I say the region, it's Mediterranean, it's one region, it's a Levant region, as a whole region. And this issue of food security has a concrete role in shaping the economic of the region, the stability and the sustainability of its livelihood. I believe that we all know that within less than 3 weeks, the Food and Agriculture Organization is going to be celebrating the World Food Day through the World Food Forum. It's considered as a celebration day for some people, but it's also considered as a hunger day for a lot of people. Giving you some numbers, 10% of the global population are suffering from hunger. 100 million people, around 100 million people in the Middle East are facing food insecurity. And we are saying food insecurity, we can't neglect interlinkages between this food insecurity, water insecurity, energy insecurity, biodiversity on a way or another. And giving you also some numbers, globally the food agro-system counts 70% of the freshwater use, 30% of energy consumption, and it's drive 90% of biodiversity. Here is the interlinkages between water, food, energy, and the ecosystem, which we call Wi-Fi nexus in our field, is direct and concrete. But do we implement this Wi-Fi system in our policies, to be honest? I do not think that there is a concrete Wi-Fi policies, not in the Levant, not in the MENA region, not also in the Mediterranean. We are trying to advocate for Wi-Fi nexus, but it's not concretely implemented in the region. And to be honest, again, when we look at the policies that govern the water sector, the policies that govern the food sector and energy sector, we found sort of gaps when we try to have a complementary policies. So to start, we need to define this gap, decrease this gap, introducing a new policy recommendation that look at the system as a whole system. Because in order to achieve sustainability, we need to look at the system, as a one package, as a one equation. So as I mentioned, there is a lot of linkages between food security, water, and energy. When we look at our region is well known that is one of scarce when it comes to water availability, freshwater availability. The amount of water that is utilizing for agriculture sector mainly is coming from the groundwater resources. Around 60% of this water from groundwater resources. The over-abstraction of groundwater resources deteriorated the quality, the availability of this water. And with the effect of climate change, a lot of farmers, vulnerable people are affecting negatively from that effect. So we need to find alternative sources for water in order to sustain the food system. Water use efficiency in agriculture. In our region, it's count between 40% to 60%, especially in Jordan, and it's up to 80% in other countries. This means that between 40% and 80% of this water that's applied to the system is lost and it's not reached the root zone, and it's go back to the system through evaporation, leaching, and percolation. Also, the percentage of non-revenue water is very high due to system leakages and thefts of water due to several reasons. What about the treated wastewater in the region? Based on the study that was published by IWMI, the volume of wastewater generated annually in 19 countries in the MENA region is around 21 billion cubic meter, of which only 2.2 billion cubic meter is treated. And from this 2.2 billion cubic meter, only, or not only, 83% of this is used for agriculture. There is a lot of portion of treated wastewater that is treated, used for agriculture. But the amount of water that's not treated and not used, and it's just burned to the sea, to the system, it's not utilized, that we can benefit from that using the technologies that I'm gonna introduce in a while, and increase the portion of treated wastewater for the system comparing to the usage of a freshwater system. I know there is a lot of concerns using this kind of water, but for sure, when I'm saying using treated wastewater, it should be based on the standard, and it should be based on awareness that's given to the farmers and brochures, extension services, what kind of crop that they can cultivate using this kind of water, and what kind of consequences that will happen in the soil due to salinization and the leaching and the amount of water that they need to put that. Why I'm saying this? Yes, I'm introducing an option to decrease the dependence on fresh water, but in the same time, we can't only introduce an option without paving the road for that option, without having the social acceptance, and without have the concrete technology, affordable technology, accessible technology to the end user who can utilize this kind of options. Now let me shift to the shocks that affect the food system. Our food system in the region is prone to external and internal shocks, as has been discussed during these 2 days. External shocks, as the conflict that happened between Ukraine and Russia, where our countries that depend on food supply mainly from that countries are affected negatively, as Egypt, as Lebanon, but also other countries were affected indirectly due to the food prices and the fluctuation in that food prices. While the internal shocks, I refer here to the shocks related to the climate change. Professor Adel already starting mentioned the floods that happened in Libya, and also the drought seasons that we are facing in the region. Globally, the natural disasters were doubled since the 18, while in our region it half tripled. Drought was normally occurred every 6 to 8 years, but now it takes place each year or 2 years. The number of people that are affected by this flash flood has doubled over the 10 years. And example, what happened in Libya is just a concrete example of that. Agriculture sector is the most vulnerable toward these internal and external shocks. What about food waste? We all know that in our region we produce much more than we consume, and we do not recycle, reuse, reproduce this food in effective and efficient way. We can utilize the food waste in a way of composting, introducing a new way for fertilizer, but we do not have adequate industry that can support the reutilization, the reuse of this food waste. Talking about food industry, we also do not have, let's say, efficient industry that can shift the raw product into an industrial agri-food product. During the lunch, we were discussing with my colleagues from Algeria the problem that they are facing each year of wasting their tomato production because they do not have adequate industry to take this tomato and convert it into some industrial sauce that can be utilizing in a way or another. So here I'm trying to highlight the main challenges that we are facing in the food system. And back to your question, Professor Rafael, regarding the policies, the strategies that we need to implement in order to enhance the food system and its security. We'll start where I started in the beginning, in the Wi-Fi nexus. I believe the Wi-Fi nexus is considered as a healing tool that enable and promote efficient resources usage. I mentioned some number related to water use efficiency, to non-revenue water, to treated wastewater, but looking at the system as a whole system, there's going to be benefit the system as well. We also need a policy that supports the increasing preparedness level toward the shocks that I mentioned, the climate change, and also the external shocks related to conflict, to the tension during the region. And this can be happened, as Professor Adel mentioned, during utilizing the technology advancements in the agri-food system. For example, we can adopt the new irrigation system that can increase the water productivity, increase the water use efficiency. We can introduce a new tolerant crop to the climate change that are tolerant to the drought, that can be customized based on the country context. We can introduce the smart agriculture system, the early warning agriculture system that can predict the frost before it's happened in order to increase the resilience of farmers and poor people who are going to be directly affected of this kind of challenges that are facing the food system, as well as the water treatment method and the technology. We also need to have adequate markets and extension services to people who are working in the agriculture system. It's not what you produce, but we need to have a linkage with what you are producing and where you're going to market this produce. Where is the food saturation, and what should I cultivate in order to serve the people, not only saturate the market and without selling that, especially when we do not have adequate value chain when it's come to food system. Awareness is a key word that we can utilize and can be implemented everywhere. Dr. Adel or Professor Adel, you mentioned the data availability, and I believe the data is the essential point that we need to concentrate on this region. It's not only the availability of the data, but the sharing of data among different countries of the region and how we can utilize this data, convert it into information, convert it into knowledge, and make the policy as driven based on evidence and based on the data that is credible, that is valid, and after all, how to disseminate the knowledge that we produced using this data among not only the vulnerable people, but also the policymaker, because they are, at the end of the word, who govern the system itself. During this 2 days, today and yesterday, a lot of colleagues mentioned or advocate for women rights and women equity. To be honest, I don't want to be too ambitious regarding this, but my concrete recommendation to policies is we need to have gender youth sensitive policies, because they are the most prone in all kinds of insecurity. And here, please allow me to refer to Multi-Deprivation Index, the poverty index that was developed recently by Oxford University in collaboration with the UNDP. In this index, they refer to the poverty not only in terms of income and the revenue, but also in terms of availability, accessibility to resources that is linked directly with the human dignity aspect, as water availability, food availability, affordability, accessibility, and the nutrition value of the food, the energy availability, and also health security, education, technology. And based on the study that we conducted at the WANA Institute, West Asia North Africa Institute, which is a policy think tank operating under the umbrella of the Royal Scientific Society, which I direct this institute. We conducted a study trying to define the linkages between food security, climate change, water shocks, and gender. And we found that gender, that women, that youth are the most sensitive toward different kinds of securities. I'm always referring to the whole equation, not only food security, because to be honest, I can't look at food without taking into account the water aspect, the energy aspect, the renewable energy aspect, accessibility, and affordability of all of the system. Sorry to take in too much time, but I will end with this sentence, and I believe it's going to open the floor for further discussion. Our food system in the region is local. I believe we reach a point where do we need a transboundary food system that support the regional stability and resilience towards all shocks. Thank you, Professor Rafael, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. So now we are going to move to Professor Hala Abu Ali, Vice President of the Institute of National Planning and Professor of Economics at the Faculty of Economics and Political Science in Cairo University. Thank you very much. Just you have another question that you remember, but is about, could you explain us which is the potential for the Southern Mediterranean countries to expand their energy production and become an alternative energy supplier for the European Union? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rafael and Adel and Majd for this paving the way. It's like speaking at the end of 2 days where many things have been already said, and I guess I see your faces. Everybody wants to leave, but so I will try to be as short and concise as possible. But I would first like to start actually by thanking all the organizers, especially Dr. Ibrahim al-Badawi and Maryse for organizing this very interesting conference and most of all inviting me. Answering the question that Rafael, I would not attempt really to answer the question as much as like to try to brainstorm you or like to open up the discussion or the thoughts about we all know that the South Mediterranean countries are richly endowed with solar and wind energy resources, which are estimated to be the highest among the world. And this gives potentials to emerge as substantial green energy producers. However, the energy mix still lies below 5% in most of the countries. There's like, if we look, the solar and wind energy does not exceed 5% in most of the South Mediterranean countries. So the question is, how can we harness those potentials? And in order not only to meet domestic energy demands, since most of us coming from the south, we know that we still encounter power outages on the domestic level, and then in order to be able to meet all the domestic energy demands and also take the remarkable opportunity that we can partner with the North Mediterranean countries and the European Union at large. I would say that why this is not happening, or I would ask why this is not happening. I guess there are 4 main reasons well, if we look at countries like Egypt, where I come from, or Morocco, or Algeria, we're not lacking nor solar nor wind energies, and still we are having problem to reach the sustainable energy for the domestic use. And in order to reach the energy transition, I think there are great potentials, because we know that the EU is committed to reduce its carbon emissions and to transition towards cleaner energy sources. Alike also, all SMEs have their plans have ratified the Paris Agreement, has their NDCs, their national determined contributions, and adopted all the post-2020 plans in order to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. So, however, given those commitments, but only modest greenhouse gas reductions has happened until now. So I guess that partnering with the North and South and aligning with the sustainability goals of everyone and ensuring that the diversification of the energy supply and there is potentials in order to accelerate the green transition, given especially the geographical proximity. And we know also, I don't need to say because this have been most of the things have been talked about between yesterday and today on the economic opportunity in order to export energy that through exporting the energy that can really bolster the economies of the south of the Mediterranean. So why this scaling up of the renewable energy is not happening, actually? So I guess that in order to... I'm sorry, I have a glitch in energy. I lost my... Oops. So, sorry. So realizing this potential necessitates investments and really important investments in infrastructure, in technologies, as Adil was mentioning, and policy frameworks that support the renewable energy development, cross-border cooperation, not just on the nexus on water and food and energy. It's within also your NWAFI nexus. And so what is like, how can we really unleash those investments, and especially private investments? I would, because it's like, I know that the governmental budgets are already very tight and very squeezed, but then there is potential in order to go for private investment. But why is it not happening? I guess that it's due to legal and regulatory barriers in the south of the Mediterranean countries that is hindering the investments in different countries. And the second thing would be the financial barriers. We know that there are many disruptors around the world nowadays. So there are the currency convertibility of the south of the Mediterranean countries, inflation, and the lack of foreign reserves are all concerns to the investors or to the private investors in the south of the Mediterranean, given the high uncertainties in the region. So we know that actually the governments of the south of the Mediterranean countries should really act quick and to start by reforming their energy sector in order to unleash the private investments that are needed. And I think that there is incentive to do that, since also Majd touched upon very quickly on gender and youth. The incentive is actually to have like a better labor market outcomes that given the increasing population in the south also. So there was a second question that Rafael did not ask me. I don't know if he still wants me to answer or not, which take us to what are really the potentials of green investment and what are their impacts on having decent jobs and creating jobs in the south. south of the Mediterranean countries. Especially, we have heard earlier about migration and migrants and all the jokes that have been made with swimming and everything. So, well, we want to create decent jobs in the south, so to have people stay there. People, when they move, they don't move because they like moving, but they move for better opportunities. So if we create the better opportunities where they are, they will be happy to stay there. So that there is no doubt that expanding green economy is seen as the possible source for new jobs. The transition to low carbon and climate resilient economies and societies has far-reaching implications for the labor market and really can generate job opportunities for the young people, not just for, that could be also gender specific. And we heard about women that are STEM skilled in the region and that are not made proper use of. So no doubt that we will need to, many workers will need to reskill and adopt different work practices that entail the use of new technologies that help improving resource efficiencies and reduce wastage. And well, those green investments, in order to be directed towards sustainable and environmentally responsible projects, have actually the power to reshape the South Mediterranean countries' economies and drive innovation and create the decent jobs, especially in sectors such as agriculture, renewable energy, green buildings, sustainable tourism, natural resource management, and related infrastructure. Yeah, so this not just the creation of jobs that is that will be generated due to this green economies from those sectors, but also the youth will be the driving force behind the climate action and the green innovation, because I assume they have to possess the enthusiasm and the digital skills that is necessary to lead the charge in implementing the green solution, and really encouraging the youth entrepreneurships, I think, in green industries can really yield substantial benefits and good outcome to the region. Also, I guess that civil society involvement is very important. They also can play a pivotal role in advocating for green policies, holding government and corporation accountable, and driving sustainable initiatives. And they can bridge the gap between the citizens and policy makers. So I think that the civil society has to have a more important role to play in this. And green investments can also simulate the innovation, and we should listen to Adel on moving into 5.0 or 6.0 and not really following the same economic growth path that all the other countries have followed, and just to leapfrog into something different in order not to pollute and then think of how are we going to clean up. So it's better to, in sum, let me sum up, because I think I've taken more than my time, and Rafael has been very patient with me, that to realize the potentials of green investment and to improve the labor market outcomes requires multifaceted approach. On the government side, that the government needs to create the supportive regulatory environments, including incentives for green projects, increasing implementing capacity, and improving data and data systems, which has been touched upon before. The financial institutions also should prioritize sustainable investments in the region, and the businesses must adopt eco-friendly practices and invest in green technologies. Also, I didn't, which is very important, is education and systems and programs and vocational training needs to be improved in the region in order to produce the new workers that are needed to drive this, this change. In conclusion, I can say that the South Mediterranean countries have a significant role to play in the EU pursuit of clean energy alternative and green investment. They hold the key to both environmental sustainability and job creation. So the youth and civil society are vital stakeholders in these endeavors as they drive innovation, advocate for change, and ensure that green initiative benefits all. So I would say that by working together, North and South, and all the players, we can unlock the immense potential of green energy and green jobs, paving the way for a brighter, more sustainable future for our region and beyond. Thank you very much.
So, a lot of things to discuss, no? A lot of ideas, as you have said, is brainstorming because the future is not written, no? As the Spanish poet said. At the end of the 19th, in one conference in Bank Union, anyone has asked me which can be the title or the name of this new century about the 2000s. And I have said probably the previous century was the century of the information, and now it is the century of the knowledge. The knowledge that is not just to have information, but to know how you can have value from this information. I think that, as you have told the three speakers in the table, data are necessary. We have data now, but sometimes we are flood of data. We are totally full of data, and we need to know how to explode them. You have said that maybe we can have basic data, and it is real. And there are a lot of studies saying that we are not controlling the data. The data are controlling what we have called the driven economy, driven data economy. So it is important to reflect about all these issues. We don't have a lot of time because Maris has told me, Kat, we are in delay. The only thing that I would like to ask for our speakers, if it is possible, is to finish with a sentence, like in a journal, with a very, very short message about what you have speak about. Continuing with Professor Ben Josep, you have started saying humanity is changing, no? But yes, humanity has changed every time, every year around the history. But if you can say just one sentence summarizing your comments, which sentence you can choose? I know that it is not easy, and there are a lot of nuances. But if we are journalists and we must put the highlight.
The highlight, I think that I'm seeing the rise of our region with these new technologies. But for that, we need the good governance and the good decision maker at the good place. Otherwise, the wall, we will take the wall. Sorry, it's not one sentence, but I think that our future may be broken by our decision maker now. We have the opportunity, we have the technologies, and I'm seeing that there is an opportunity, historical opportunity nowadays, to have delocalization of R&D in the south.
Thank you. It's not a sentence, but
Yes,
it
but
is
I'm
a nice
saying,
summary.
yeah, but this is, we have the opportunities with this technology to not to leapfrog, to change radically our economy, if we have the people that can take the good decision. If they are not going to take the good decision, they are going to destroy generation. Sorry to say it like this.
So a successful future starts today. Okay, so Dr. Anaver.
Yes, for sure. Is it working? Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I have one sentence. I write it just now. Our countries are working in silos, and we need to build a region of complementarity, not only for the food system, but also for the whole environmental system in order to build better livelihood and sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have more time.
Yeah, I know.
You don't one sentence.
Me, well, I think partnerships, yes, are very important. So I built on what Majd has been saying, and everybody needs to do his work properly, I guess. The government has to assume their responsibility. They have to look at the youth and civil society as vital stakeholders. And of course, that even the private sector has to be less risk averse, if one can say that. And they have to all, North and South, work together in order to harness the potential of the green transition. Yes.
Thank you very much. So I think we are going to close here the session.
Somebody
maybe
wants
we can
to say something?
spend 10 minutes for questions or not?
You're satisfied, everybody.
Everyone wants to leave.
Nobody wants.
10 minutes? Okay, thank you. So we'll open the floor. If you have questions.
Everybody wants to leave.
No pressure.
Okay,
You know.
so perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor عادل. شرفت بوجودي معك.